So the story of Ronda Rousey in WWE 2018 to 2019 is absolute chaos from start to finish. And I'm talking from the first segment she was ever in WWE, after signing with the company, all the way to the last one in her first year. Carnage. And everything in between is carnage. It's honestly like the most ups and downs I think a wrestler has had in their first year in WWE ever. I cannot think of anyone who had this much drama packed into 1 year. So let's start the story back in 2015, WrestleMania 31. Ronda was a massive WWE fan, so obviously she's a UFC great by this point, women's pioneer for women's MMA and everything, but she's also a massive wrestling fan. I remember actually, I don't know if it was Shayna Baszler or one of the other Four Horsewomen, filmed Ronda Rousey reacting to the Shield breaking up, and it's like Ronda could not believe what she was watching. She was clearly just a wrestling fan. So fast forward to, because the Shield broke up, June 2014? So fast forward to WrestleMania 31, March, of 2015, and Ronda's in the front row with the Four Horsewomen. And Triple H comes out with Stephanie, and they brag about the WrestleMania attendance, they brag that Triple H has just beaten Sting, and then The Rock appears. The Rock himself appears at WrestleMania, and obviously gets into a bit of a verbal spat with Stephanie and Triple H, and Stephanie tells him to leave the ring. So The Rock leaves the ring, and then he goes to ringside, he gets Ronda Rousey, brings her into the ring, and The Rock says something along the lines of, I might not hit a woman, Stephanie, but I know someone who will, and then Ronda's right there. She ends up sending Triple H flying across the ring. She grabs Stephanie's arm, it looks like she's going to lock her in some kind of UFC submission move, and then she just throws Stephanie to the ground. And then Stephanie and Triple H bail it, The Rock and Ronda are the big heroes, and that gives us the context for Ronda eventually joining WWE. That gives us the background for when she eventually joins WWE, which it was just inevitable in 2017, early 2018 that she was going to join. Then she's already got a ready-made opponent in Stephanie McMahon. So, heading into 2018, the women in WWE have undergone a massive transformation, because back when Ronda appeared in 2015, it was all about the divas and the pink title, and women weren't being given enough of a chance. Charlotte, Becky, and Sasha hadn't even been called up by that point, so it was all about divas when Ronda appeared then. 3 years on, or almost 3 years on, now the women have had a Hell in a Cell match. They have Money in the Bank matches. They're about to have the first ever Women's Royal Rumble, so everything has changed, and they end up having the first Women's Royal Rumble, and Asuka is the winner. And at the time, Asuka, she ended up having a 914-day undefeated streak. So at this point, she's about 800 days in. Not exactly, but about 800 days in. So she wins the Rumble. And at the end of the Rumble, she's got Alexa Bliss in the ring with her, who is the Raw Women's Champion, and Charlotte Flair, the SmackDown Women's Champion. And she can choose whoever she wants to face. So Asuka is there. It looks like she's about to choose one of them. And then Ronda Rousey's music hits. Joan Jett, Bad Reputation. Out comes Ronda Rousey. And this is, to me, this is the first moment. Well, it's the first blooming moment of a WWE career officially. But it's the first moment straight away where I'm thinking, what are they doing with Ronda Rousey? Because Asuka's there. She's just won the Rumble. She's pointing up at the WrestleMania sign, if I can point on the camera for those who are watching on YouTube. And this is Asuka's moment. Like, she's just won the Rumble. They don't need Ronda Rousey to appear at the Rumble. They've already made history. They've got Asuka's big moment. She should now choose the champion, or at least tease something, but that's it. But instead, Ronda Rousey comes out, completely overshadows everything. And it's not her fault. I'm just saying this is the booking of it. So I'm not saying, like, how dare Ronda do this, because this is just the story. But immediately you're thinking, well, I don't really like this Ronda character, because she's come out, Asuka's the big fan favourite, and now Ronda's stealing the spotlight. She even tried to shake hands with Asuka, and Asuka slapped her hand away, so it looked like they were going to feud after that. But then Ronda goes to ringside and shakes hands with Stephanie McMahon. It's reluctant on Stephanie's part, which sort of continues the feud from 3 years earlier, and it's pretty clear then Ronda's first feud will be with Stephanie McMahon. And it was interesting because most people who come into WWE, a celebrity or a sports star, they're part-timers. They don't come in like Ronda and become a full-timer, but that's what she did. She came in and not immediately, but within a few months, she was in all the live events. She was traveling the world. She was just wrestling all the time, and you don't normally get that with these people who come in. So Ronda, for the first couple of months, is just involved in segments on Raw. I think Elimination Chamber, there was a contract signing because, of course, the obvious match would have been Ronda and The Rock versus Triple H and Stephanie at WrestleMania 34 for Ronda's official in-ring debut, but that didn't happen because it was, I don't know. I don't know if The Rock, he was probably filming a movie or something. You know what The Rock's like. Whenever there's a plan in place, he'll get out of it somehow and he'll go and do something else. So this ended up being Kurt Angle and Ronda Rousey versus Triple H and Stephanie, which was a good replacement for The Rock because Kurt Angle with the Olympic background, Ronda with the Olympic background. So it was good. It was a good build. Well, I say it was good. There was a lot of segments early on that with Ronda, I remember because I was a wrestling writer at the time, so I was covering all of this and sort of analysing every segment. And Ronda was the most hit and I remember writing it at the time saying Ronda Rousey is the most hit and miss WWE superstar I've ever seen. Because one segment would be A+, and you'd think she is an amazing WWE superstar. Like as a performer, her acting, the believability of it all, I'm believing it. I'm not thinking this is a show. This is like, oh my god, this is real. I'm well, not real, but you get lost in the characters. However, the next week, it would be all over the place. And it would be an F grade. And then the next week, B, the next week F, the next week A+, and it was just so hit and miss. So heading into WrestleMania, I was more excited about Ronda and Kurt versus Triple H and Stephanie than anything else on the show, because it was just, didn't know what to expect. So the match delivered, and not just delivered, this is one of the best WrestleMania matches I've ever seen. It might not stand the test of time now if you go back and watch it, because you might not have the feeling that anyone watching it at that point did, which is the whole weeks, even years of anticipation of what the match is actually going to be like. But it was great. Classic WWE drama, Triple H, Stephanie, Ronda throwing Triple H around again. And I even remember Ronda got Triple H on her shoulders, and they used that on WWE promotional material for years after. So she got the big moment straight away. And even Jim Ross, the legendary commentator, said it was the best debut he'd ever seen. And he'd been in the wrestling business for about 60 years when he said that. So, or 50, 60 years, whatever. So that just shows this, like I even say, Ronda Rousey, Bad Bunny, Logan Paul, all had amazing debuts, but I do think Ronda's was the best of the three. So heading out of WrestleMania, I would expect WWE to promote Ronda Rousey, who was dubbed the baddest woman on the planet. I would expect them to put her with somebody like Asuka, because Asuka lost her undefeated streak at WrestleMania 34 to Charlotte Flair, unsuccessfully challenged for the SmackDown Women's Championship, and then Ronda stays on Raw, Asuka stays on SmackDown, and Asuka ends up feuding with Carmella, who just won the SmackDown Women's title with the Money in the Bank cash-in from Charlotte straight after WrestleMania. So now Carmella's the SmackDown Women's Champion, and the Raw Women's Champion is Nia Jax. But Ronda is on Raw, but really, I feel like they should have revived the Asuka storyline, because that was Ronda's big thing when she came in. She interrupted Asuka. Asuka slapped her hand away. So after WrestleMania, I'm thinking, right, this is the story now. But no. Asuka stays on SmackDown, ends up feuding with Carmella all summer, and James Ellsworth. Meanwhile, on Raw, Ronda Rousey kind of disappears for a bit, and then it's suddenly announced that she's the new number one contender for Nia Jax's title. Again, the booking, the storytelling, the lack of logic in any of this is straight away just thinking, what are they doing with Ronda? And she was coming out cutting promos saying, I want to be the new, I want to be a hero, and I want to be the new Bret Hart, the new Roddy Piper, and everyone's obviously cheering every time she says a legend's name. And she's saying, I want to be Stone Cold Steve Austin, and smiling and doing all this stuff. And I'm watching this like, you want to be the baddest woman on the planet here. That this is, and again, I'm not criticising Ronda, I'm criticising the storytelling of it, the presentation of Ronda, because she should come in like Roman Reigns was doing in 2020 when he when he was repackaged as the tribal chief, and the whole presentation was wreck everyone and leave. Roman Reigns would come in, destroy everyone and leave. Or Steve Austin back in the day. What was it? Raise hell, leave. Whatever his slogan thing was. That's what Ronda should have been. Not, I want to be your fan favourite and I want to, I want everyone to cheer for me is basically what it was. But the problem is, when you bring someone new into WWE, they need to earn it. That even if they're popular or whatever, they need to earn a title shot. Not you don't just come in and you just get it. Because otherwise the fans will never be on their side. They need to go through more. They need more setbacks in their career for fans to really, truly get behind that character. And that's where they went wrong immediately with Ronda. Not following up with the Asuka thing. Then throwing her in there with Nia Jax, even though a lot of the times as fans sit through qualifying matches, another qualifier, another number one contender. You can watch 2.5 hours in the space of 3 weeks of qualifying matches just to get a new number one contender. But then with this well, Ronda's a new number one contender, out of nowhere. So she ends up having this match with Nia. I think it was Money in the Bank 2018. And Alexa Bliss, who had lost the title to Nia Jax at WrestleMania 34. A lot of numbers to remember here. But Alexa lost the title to Nia Jax at WrestleMania 34. About 3 months later, it's this Money in the Bank match. Alexa Bliss wins the Money in the Bank briefcase. So she then interferes in Nia versus Ronda, causes a DQ, and she then cashes in on Nia to win the title. So Alexa Bliss regains the Raw Women's Championship, which sets up Alexa versus Ronda at SummerSlam. So, again, straight away, it's just, this is not the most compelling of story that they're telling with Ronda. It's almost like they had this Nia versus Alexa story and they just insert Ronda in there because they didn't have any plans for it. That's how it felt. Whereas I think a lot of people were thinking, well, for years they've kind of teased this 4 horsewoman versus 4 horsewoman thing between the 4 horsewomen of WWE, Bayley, Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch, and the 4 horsewomen of MMA, the Ronda's women. I don't need to go through them all. Ronda's women. But no, they didn't even do anything with that. It was just, okay, we'll just put her in the Nia Jax, Alexa Bliss thing. So we get to SummerSlam, and this is where it starts to go even more wrong, I felt like, for the Ronda character. Because instead of having a real match with Alexa, who, for the previous year, before losing to Nia Jax at WrestleMania, had been the champion. The Raw Women's Champion for 47, I think, of the previous 48 weeks, apart from briefly losing the title to Sasha Banks in 2017. So Alexa is now treated in this match against Ronda like a joke, even though she's been the serious, credible champion of the previous, basically, year and a half. She's just a comedy character in this match. She's running away from Ronda, she's getting back in the ring. Ronda's sitting. Ronda, at one moment, one of the most comical moments in any wrestling match I've ever seen in my life, Ronda sits in the middle of a ring, cross-legged in the middle of a ring. Alexa comes up behind her and puts her in some kind of chin lock thing, and the crowd are laughing because it's so ridiculous. It's so unbelievable that Alexa Bliss could do anything to Ronda that it's just a massive joke. And then Ronda wins within 5, I think it's a 5-minute match. Ronda wins. She just completely squashes Alexa Bliss, and she's the new Raw Women's Champion. So how quick is that trajectory to go from debut at the Rumble, Asuka slaps her hand away, we then go to WrestleMania, great match with Stephanie and Triple H, then this Nia Jax thing, and then suddenly Ronda's a champion. So already fans are obviously thinking, well, you're shoving Ronda down our throats now. She's not really earned this. She's not had enough setbacks. I mean, she's not had any setbacks, really. Briefly at Money in the Bank, when Alexa Bliss cashed in and caused a DQ, but, I mean, she's not had any setbacks for anyone to care about her being a champion. So, after SummerSlam, actually, they continued the Alexa feud. They had a rematch. I think it was either Night of Champions or I think it was Hell in a Cell of 2018, and Ronda retains against Alexa in a bit more of a competitive match. And then, this is where things get a little bit more interesting, because around this time, SummerSlam 2018, that's when Becky Lynch over on SmackDown started to become the man. the man, the most interesting character in WWE at the time. And she attacked Charlotte Flair after Charlotte beat Carmella and Becky at SummerSlam. Becky attacks Charlotte. And WWE think this is a heel turn. They look at this like Becky is the new heel in this story. Whereas the fans are going, no, this is amazing. Like, Becky's not a heel. Becky's like this vicious person who should be attacking Charlotte Flair. Yeah, she's not a heel for doing that. So, as the weeks go on, her popularity skyrockets. Like we hadn't seen since Daniel Bryan's Yes Movement thing. So, over on SmackDown, it's really interesting. Becky and Charlotte are in the most interesting stories every single week. Their segments are phenomenal. Everything Becky Lynch is doing is gold. Meanwhile, on Raw, we've got these kind of a bit of a joke thing going on with Ronda and Alexa. And then Ronda forms a brief alliance with the Bella Twins, heading into an Australia show. I think it was Super Showdown. And Ronda and the Bella Twins beat the Riot Squad, Liv Morgan, Sarah Logan, and Ruby Riot. And then that leads to the Bella Twins turning heel on Ronda. And in fairness, at this point, Ronda cuts some great promos. There's some that are a bit cringe, if I'm just being honest, but some were great. Like, she delivered some great lines on Raw to Nikki Bella, and the match was set up for Evolution. So Evolution, the first all-women's pay-per-view, the main event, Ronda Rousey defending the Raw Women's Championship against Nikki Bella. The problem is, even though fans at this point were still on Ronda's side, they weren't booing her yet. They will do soon. Spoiler, they will do soon, but not yet. Because they still kind of respected her. But the storyline between Ronda and Nikki, although they had the star power, Ronda was the big new signing, she had the UFC background, Nikki Bella had the Total Diva stuff, she'd been with John Cena and everything for a couple of years, so she was more high profile than Becky and Charlotte, arguably. But Becky and Charlotte is the story that everyone was interested in. So they end up going on earlier in the show. I can't remember if it was the penultimate match on the card, but at Evolution, Becky and Charlotte steal the show in a last woman standing match, which I think was one of the best WWE matches of that era. And it's a phenomenal match. Becky beats Charlotte, so she's the SmackDown Women's Champion. And then Ronda retains the Raw Women's Championship. But really, it was like the Charlotte-Becky match was 10 out of 10. You don't get much better than that. It was amazing. And then the Ronda-Nikki match was like a 7 out of 10. It was alright. So coming out of it, you're thinking, well, actually, all the fans thought Becky Charlotte should have main evented, but they didn't. But they showed what they should have done. So really, fans were all about Becky Lynch then, and not so much Ronda Rousey. So after Evolution, then we have Survivor Series. And this is obviously the event with a champion versus champion. So it's supposed to be Becky Lynch versus Ronda Rousey. But there's a massive twist. And actually, I forgot to mention, but the storyline rumour, like a year in advance, was that it was going to be Charlotte Flair versus Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania 35 in the main event. So for months and months, we've all thought that's what's going to happen, and that's what the story is going to lead towards. But in the build-up to Survivor Series, when it's supposed to be Becky versus Ronda, Becky Lynch gets the moment. The moment that, I mean, this is revisionist history. People say this is the moment that made the man, but really, it wasn't. This moment on Raw, where Nia Jax, with the fist, the face breaker, and she punches Becky Lynch in the face in this in a SmackDown invaded Raw, just ahead of Survivor Series. Nia Jax punches Becky in the face and breaks her face. I'd never heard the term face or broken face until this happened, and then it was just all the commentators saying Becky Lynch suffered a broken face, which just didn't seem like correct grammar to me. But yeah, she suffered a broken face. Nia Jax became the face breaker. Becky Lynch broke her nose. She had a black eye. She had a concussion, and she was out of Survivor Series. So Ronda didn't have an opponent 5 days before Survivor Series. So Charlotte Flair, even though she wasn't the champion, suddenly became Ronda's new opponent. So the WrestleMania match that everyone thought we were going to get a few months later suddenly happens now at Survivor Series 2018. So it's Ronda versus Charlotte, and this match is epic, like absolutely amazing. But this is the night where it all sort of went wrong for Ronda, because at the time, Ronda was still a face, and Charlotte's character was getting booed, but she was kind of, I can't even remember, to be honest, if she was a face or a heel going into Survivor Series, because fans were just booing her during the whole Becky thing anyway, even though WWE were trying to force it that Becky was still a heel until they eventually gave up and let her be a face. But Ronda, she's supposed to be the hero here, and the fans don't care because they love Becky too much. Even though Becky's not in this match, they're still chanting for Becky. And Charlotte goes berserk in the closing stages and produces probably the. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say this might be Charlotte's best ever performance as a WWE superstar, because I'm talking in proper WWE language here, aren't I? Like they've really got it in. They've ingrained it in my brain for so many years that you refer to these people as superstars. So, but this really was her best performance ever as a WWE superstar, because she attacks Ronda with a kendo stick towards the end, causes a DQ, which ordinarily would be like, oh god, that's boring. They've like taken the easy way out and done a DQ, so there's not a definitive winner. But really, what Charlotte does post match is amazing, because her character just completely loses it and just destroys Ronda Rousey. Just kendo stick. I think it was a steel chair. Yeah, because she wrapped a steel chair around her neck and then stomped on it. Hit her with natural selection and everything. All the officials and everybody had to come out, and Ronda was just getting beaten. And this is what the character needs, though. So it's a good thing. Even though even though this was the moment that turned fans against Ronda, like officially, which I'll come to in a second, but the characters need this. Like they need to get beaten up, and then fans will go, oh, we want to see him come back from it. Or maybe not, because what happened with Ronda, even though this was in her home state of California, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this was the moment where fans had already they'd not turned against her too much. Online they had, because you know what it's like online. But in the arenas, they weren't booing her every week. It wasn't too bad. But this was bad. She was getting booed. And afterwards, as Charlotte is attacking the babyface Ronda Rousey character, the fans are chanting, "Thank you, Charlotte." In Ronda Rousey's home state. This is bad. Like, you know it's got bad at this point. So after that, she's still a babyface. Unbelievably, she's still a babyface. So she's not the baddest woman on the planet, though, which is what she is saying, what her moniker is, but she's still a babyface, her character. So coming out of this, we head into TLC 2018. And Nia Jax has said in interviews in recent years that she didn't want Ronda to face Alexa again. And this is one thing I forgot to mention at the end of the Alexa rivalry, is that Alexa Bliss suffered 2 concussions in the matches against Ronda Rousey. Like, legitimately suffered concussions against Ronda by taking one of her moves. And I think it was Piper's Pit, or one of the moves, it gave Alexa a concussion twice, and she couldn't wrestle for like 5 months or something. And that's why she didn't compete at Evolution. She was supposed to face Trish Stratus, but it was cancelled, and that was supposed to be one of the biggest matches on the show. But because Ronda allegedly, I don't know if I need to say allegedly, but I'll say it anyway, allegedly inflicted these injuries on Alexa, she was off WWE TV for a little while and then was just a character on the show, but not wrestling. So Nia Jax has said in interviews that she went to WWE's higher-ups, Vince, I don't know if it was Vince or someone else in creative, and said, put me with Ronda. Because they'd wrestled before, and Nia said, I can handle Ronda's moves, whereas Alexa can't, so stop putting her in the ring with Alexa. I was quite surprised when I heard it, but that's what she said. So heading into TLC, Nia had won a battle royal at Evolution to be the number 1 contender, so it was Nia versus Ronda again. At TLC, Ronda gets the win, but fans have turned against her by this point. It's not horrific, like some fans are still cheering for her, but for the most part, they're booing her. So it gets to the main event of TLC, which is Asuka versus Becky versus Charlotte for the SmackDown Women's Championship. And Asuka wins the match because Ronda Rousey interferes, pushes a ladder over, which had Becky and Charlotte on it, and then Asuka grabs the title. She's the new SmackDown Women's Champion. And then this was the moment, really, where for the weeks leading up to it, it had been a massive rumour of, okay, they're still going to go with Ronda versus Charlotte at WrestleMania because of what happened at Survivor Series. Because of the manner of Charlotte's because of the manner of Ronda's win via DQ, it allows them to have a rematch at WrestleMania. But then there's still Becky in the mix. So people were thinking, are they really, despite Becky Lynch's massive momentum and popularity, are they really going to not go with her? Are they just going to stick with Ronda versus Charlotte? But this moment at TLC, where Ronda comes out at the end, pushes the ladder over, pushes Becky and Charlotte over, then it's like, okay, we know what they're doing. They're going to go to WrestleMania with this. And it was pretty clear from that moment on. But there's still like 3 or 4 months to get to before WrestleMania. So the next month, Royal Rumble, January 2019, Ronda retains the Raw Women's Championship against Sasha Banks. Just a short rivalry, but it was a good match. And then Becky wins the Rumble. So the heroic Becky Lynch, everyone's buzzing for Becky Lynch because she's won this match. But then where does that leave Charlotte? So this is where the story just gets so frigging confusing. I don't even know how to explain it because there's so many illogical twists and turns. But it's obvious that will be a triple threat main event at WrestleMania. But the story is all over the place. Vince McMahon gets involved. He takes Becky out the match for some bizarre reason. Charlotte's put into the match. So then it's Ronda versus Charlotte. Everyone's booing for that. At one point, Ronda is no longer in the match because she threatens to relinquish her title. I don't know what was going on, but it was all over the place. Like, absolute, just awful storytelling. Absolutely awful storytelling. And there was even a thing at Fastlane where Becky had to earn a spot back into the match or something. I can't even remember, because it doesn't even matter. Basically, they got to WrestleMania. But between the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, Ronda is... I don't know how to say this, because I feel like I've been quite positive. I think a lot of people are very negative about Ronda, whereas I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt with a lot of this and saying, actually, WWE should have treated her like Logan Paul and allowed her to have a part-time role initially while she gets used to it, but instead they just threw her out there. Live events, and it was really obvious with some of the segments that she didn't really know what she was doing. It felt like with some of the talking segments, and maybe they'd not been through it enough, and I don't know. But anyway, it got to a point where she was doing these YouTube videos, and she was crying in one of them, saying that she can't handle the schedule, and that being a wrestler is like way more difficult than she thought. And obviously, when you've got Becky there, who is the massive hero, and she was just slating everybody, especially Ronda online and Charlotte, but especially Ronda. I mean, she was absolutely destroying Ronda on Twitter with these tweets about her husband, about anything that Ronda would say, Becky would be on it, and she'd be tweeting about it. So Becky turns this into like Ronda couldn't hack it, so she went and got a jacket. She's posting all this stuff about Ronda, just taking a mick out of her every day almost on social media, and the fans just are loving it. Like, they are taking a mick out of Ronda as well, even though she's still a face. So officially, she turns heel finally in March of 2019. This is just so late on in the story for them to finally turn a heel. It should have been done back in November after Survivor Series. But Ronda turns heel. She says this line. It was like, "Damn the man, boo, screw the woo," saying this to Becky and Charlotte. "No more Mrs. Nice." And then she says a swear word that I feel like I can't say because I'll get flagged if I say it. But then she attacks them both, and she turns against the crowd as well, saying like, "You never supported me," and all this. So this is what we needed initially. This version of Ronda, she could even act like this and still be a face. But because she was presented initially like, I want to be Stone Cold, I want to be Bret Hart, I want to be Roddy Piper, and I'm the big smiley babyface, fans just were not buying this whole thing. Because she wasn't the baddest woman on the planet. And I can't remember if I mentioned earlier, but I had my own wrestling site at the time, and I was covering this every day. And when Becky would tweet anything, everything was newsworthy. Whereas Ronda, it was like everything was negative. It was like moaning about being in WWE. So the fans are naturally turning against her. And by the way, we talk about the baddest woman on the planet, her moniker. This is just a wrestling writing story because I was a wrestling writer for 8 years. So this is just a little side note. I remember, because if you write an article, whether it's wrestling or any kind of website, let's say the first sentence you talk about Roman Reigns. You would write Roman Reigns. The next one you'd write Reigns, because you don't want to repeat Roman Reigns, Roman Reigns, Roman Reigns throughout the whole article. So you might say Roman Reigns first, then Reigns, then the tribal chief, then the former bloodline leader, then the former Shield member, or whatever. And you just mix it up a bit. I am going somewhere with this. This is about Ronda. But I was working with someone who the first paragraph was Ronda Rousey. The next one was Rousey. The next paragraph they referred to her as, I don't know what, like the former UFC star, no problem. Then it was the baddest woman on the planet, no problem. A little bit further down, they refer to her as the worst woman on the planet. I'm like, what? How can you call her the worst woman on the planet? So their excuse for this, well, it's a synonym. Yeah, I know, but you can't just put baddest into Google and change it to worst, because her name's not the worst woman on the planet. Her name, like her nickname is the baddest woman on the planet, not the worst woman on the planet. So anyway, just a little side note there, but that sums up wrestling journalism and how 80% of the friggin' wrestling writers out there have no idea what they're doing. They're just wrestling fans who want to write about it, but they can't write at all and don't know what they're doing. So yeah, she's not the worst woman on the planet. She was the baddest woman on the planet. So we're going to WrestleMania anyway. And there's an amazing segment a week before WrestleMania where Becky, Charlotte, and Ronda all get arrested on Raw. And they're all handcuffed because I think the storyline was that they weren't allowed to touch each other before WrestleMania. And they beat the Riot Squad in a 6-woman tag match. And then they start attacking each other. So they all get arrested, handcuffed, and they go backstage into the parking lot. And there's police cars and they're all just kicking each other. And it's carnage, but it is honestly a really, really good segment. Probably the best that Ronda was ever involved in. And that is the last scene of them, I think, before WrestleMania. So we get to the match. We get to the show, and just as a little side note, I'll just say this absolutely deserved to main event WrestleMania, because in the previous few years, because the Divas Revolution, which became the Women's Evolution, led to lots of women getting like Hell in a Cell matches, Money in the Bank matches, the Royal Rumble. Sometimes if they main evented, people would think, oh, they're just trying to, push the women's division. But I will say, this WrestleMania main event, there was nothing else on the card that could have been the main event except for Becky, Charlotte, Ronda. Because Kofi and Daniel Bryan had their big match, but that really was like 6 weeks in the making. Whereas this women's triple threat was like 8 months in the making. Or a year, really, since Ronda came in. It was obvious she was going to have a big match, and this deserved to be the main event. So, the match itself, well, they had Charlotte come in on a helicopter in her entrance, so it had the big grand spectacle. Ronda Rousey had Joan Jett performing Bad Reputation, and then Becky was the big hero. And Charlotte actually was the new SmackDown Women's Champion because Asuka had been robbed in the build-up to WrestleMania. Absolutely robbed. Asuka was supposed to have a match. I think it was supposed to be against Sonya Deville or maybe Mandy Rose. And they had her lose the title to Charlotte in the build-up to WrestleMania. So then the main event was Ronda, who was the Raw Women's Champion, Charlotte, SmackDown Women's Champion, and then Becky, who was the Royal Rumble winner, trying to win both titles. And the match itself wasn't great, to be honest. It was just alright. It wasn't the big, massive WrestleMania main event that people want. It was just... But in fairness, it was more about the outcome. I mean, you want a good match as well, but this was all about the outcome. And Becky got the win. But, I mean, this is why I said earlier, the Ronda's start in WWE, the whole overshadowing Asuka, and then the end of her first year, both were just chaotic because the pinfall that Becky Lynch got on Ronda, there was a botch because Ronda's shoulder was up and the referee didn't spot it, so he counted to 3 and that was the end of the match. But to the audience at home, like us watching it, and even the fans in the arena, it was just very awkward. So it was like, honestly, one of the worst finishes to a WrestleMania match ever because it didn't make sense because it wasn't even a 3 count, but the referee counted to 3 and then Becky had both titles and that was her big heroic moment, and Ronda disappeared after that for the next 3 years and then she came back, but we'll save that for another time. But that was the end of Ronda's first year in WWE. It just could have been a lot better. And I think the main problem was just the presentation of it. She should have been this Street Fighter type character who comes in and, like I said earlier, like Roman Reigns, wreck everyone and leave. Just come in, destroy everything. But instead, it's I'm going to be the big hero, and it just wasn't what the character should have been. And I think the storylines and the people she was put with was so underwhelming. I still cannot believe they didn't follow up with Ronda Rousey versus Asuka. They were never in the same ring after that. They never had a match. I even checked before this because I wanted to get that bit right. I don't do a lot of research for these. I kind of just ramble. But I did think, did they ever have a match? Never. So it is still baffling to me that Ronda and Asuka never had a match. But there we go. That sums up Ronda's first year in WWE.